Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. Can't believe we are already in December here in the year 2021. I'm sure for all of us, this year has been a bunch of ups and downs, and I'm sure and I wish that we've hoped the highs more than the lows. Today, I'm having the pleasure of speaking and having on with me Wyatt Filipowicz from Consortiq. My name is Nick. I am the host today. I've been at Phase 1 a couple of years now. I run and manage our unmanned product here, the IXM, the Phase 1 IXM. And today, Wyatt and I will be having a sort of podcast about a few jobs that he's completed. But before we dive into those, Wyatt, if you want to introduce yourself to the audience, and then we'll dive in.
Sounds good, Nick. Thanks, appreciate it. My name is Wyatt Filipowicz. I am the Chief UAS Pilot for Consortiq LLC. We are a data capture drone service provider. I guess I'm their resident Phase 1 expert.
That's what we like to hear. He has been, and Wyatt, when did you invest in our IXM product? 3, 4 years ago now?
Yeah, I think it's 2018. Yeah.
Right on, right on. Well, yeah, today the highlight and the topic is going to be utilizing the right sensor for the right job. And we think, for Wyatt's 2 jobs that he's going to get in today and talk about, we feel like we've, created not only advantages, but cost effectiveness, time, and efficiency. And of course, Wyatt's going to dive into these. But Wyatt, before we get into this, can you tell us about the 2 recently projects you've completed when using our sensor?
Sure thing. So these were 2 rather unique commercial jobs. I'd expect there'll be more after doing it this way. First of which was a crude oil pipeline. Nothing all that abnormal there about that, but this one was an actual archway that spanned a canal that had freight ships cruising through it. So definitely unusual. And the second project was a dam spillway, checking it for cracks in the concrete, condition assessment. Both of these jobs were taken on mainly from a safety aspect, because the way they were conventionally being inspected, it was not the safest way. So they were looking for something new.
Yeah, Wyatt. And I think going into that first job, this dam spillway, you can see here, and just take us through as far as a setup for those who haven't set up the camera, kind of a strategic, or an agenda of what that setup, takes and time wise, and how long does that take you?
Yeah, initially getting on a job, I'd say it takes me 30 to 40 minutes to get set up. Get your drone out, get your batteries, camera all set up. I run mine with dual iPads. I run one with the actual flight app, and I run the other with the IX Capture. I've got my live feed, so I get everything turned on, start going through my camera settings, ISO, f-stop, make sure everything's set properly, fire up my PPK unit, make sure it's got a positional lock for where it is, calibrate the drone, make sure it knows where it is, because you don't need any oddities, any flyaways when you're around all that metal and everything else. And then if the area is clear after I check my airspace, going through all that type of stuff, get up and take a few sample images and find that sweet spot for all my settings.
Yeah. And Wyatt, if you can kind of dive in, what were some of the deliverables as far as this bridge? What were these deliverables? Walk us through, what it took, as far as pre-flight. So I think you loaded a DSM, I would assume, from a LiDAR. So walk us through what you did to create this strategic flight plan to achieve 1 millimeter GSD.
Yeah. So yeah, the dam was a big one. This is a over a kilometer long spillway, so it's a lot of surface area. First thing we did was we popped up another UAV with a LiDAR sensor on it and flew the entire area. We wanted to create our own DEM, our own digital elevation model, because as you know, Phase 1s, their cameras are distance-based focused. So it's very important to have the drone stay at a consistent level to what your subject is. So we wanted that DEM. We created that. We imported our custom DEM into UGCS software, and then did all our mission planning from there. So that way the drone would follow the contours. And the spillway, it's not only flat, but it also has sides that come up 15, 20 feet concrete sides. And we're going outside of this thing mapping, not just inside of it. You're doing overlap. So with that DEM, you could actually see the drone pick up when it got over top of the tops of the walls. Um, that's just it has to be done in a case like this. If you want to maintain or get that 1 millimeter GSD, you've got to stay at that consistent height. And from the start of the dam to the end, like I said, a kilometer, you're falling a quarter inch per foot or so. So you've got 30 feet difference by the time you reach the end of the spillway. If you're not maintaining that consistent height, your focus is going to be off. They're not. The images will be good, but they're not going to be that 1 millimeter GSD like you want.
Yeah. And why going on that focus, I mean, I think you said it best, the phase one focus it's a distance base rather than your standard contrast based autofocus on other cameras. So, as far as like a skill for that, how long did it take you to hone in, and like what would you recommend to really dial in to where that entire image from edge to edge, is just sharp, crystal clear? If I need to, double click and do a digital zoom on a photo, in the top left, and that piece is still just crystal clear, like talks to a little bit more about the focus and what you've seen to hone in on using the phase one distance-based focus.
I mean, it's definitely different from your typical DJI or these others where it's tap to focus. You don't have that, and there's these crazy equations out there for figuring out, what your distance should be. But in my case, what it always worked out great was, I knew my elevation because the drone tells you within a feet or a certain distance. And then most drones also have obstacle avoidance, which gives you your distance to whatever's in front of you. So just finding that sweet spot. If I know I'm 100 feet up in the air, phase one is a metric camera. So you're doing all the focus settings in meters. So 30 meters, at a, say, 70-degree pitch angle, if you're doing, obliques, winds up being perfect. It took a little while to get used to, but, if you go with that rule of thumb, it works out pretty well.
Good. Thanks for the description there. I know with folks that I talk to, quite often is, they expect the camera to do all the work when we ship it out, and, there's just some learning curves. And I guess going on that topic, Wyatt, I mean, you've had it now for almost 5 years now. What would you say are some learning curves that you had to overcome early on when you invested in our camera?
Some learning curves. Getting over the fear of flying that expensive drone and crashing it. That's what they make insurance for. So, that was definitely one of them. But yeah, getting that focus set right, just being comfortable with it. The phase one cameras are amazing. And once you get that first image set, and get the proper focus, every spot you click on that image is just crystal clear. There's no question. I don't even second guess it. Once I get the focus set, and just let it fly. And they're all just fine. Watch your ISO, adjust that as needed, as you're flying, so you're not overexposing images. But I can fly that thing as fast as it'll go, 35, 40 miles an hour. And I've never seen a camera trigger this fast and never have motion blur. It's just amazing.
I think that attests to our call it proof in the pudding, and our money maker being an aerial, manned aircraft today. I think we can attest to that, and that just carries over, like you said, flying quicker and higher. And I do see some advantages, with beyond visual line of sight, waivers, everybody applying for these waivers, being able to fly higher, faster. I think that's really when our technology and our hardware will create some advantages. To this point, Wyatt, the deliverables here, you talked about that. As far as like overlap, this being a mapping type mission, what recommendations of overlap would you prefer for mapping type missions?
Most of the time I'm going with the 70% front, 70% side. You're always better to have too much than not enough. You can always exclude a few images, or it's just extra data. But it's kind of hard to go back and get it over again. You got to repeat the job. So yeah, definitely 70/70 or 70/75. Yeah, that always seems to work well for me.
And then as far as like, I don't know, 1 millimeter GSD, Wyatt, that's why, I'm thankful for a customer like you. Walk us through like the kind of mental preparation or the pre-flight programming, all of that that goes into when you have a customer ask 1 millimeter GSD. Were you kind of concerned of not achieving that? Like, walk us through kind of your mindset going into it.
I honestly had no doubts of it being able to do it. It's just a question of height and any obstacles in the way. Trying to figure out how many batteries I was going to need, how many flights it was going to be. I was a little concerned with this one at first about possibly motion blur because it was, we're flying at 60 feet, 20 meters
Yeah.
off the surface. A little lower than I normally do. But it handled it like a dream. Not a single problem. So yeah, just planning everything out in the mission planner, getting your flight lines, making sure you're several lines outside of your subjects, that you've got good overlap, like plenty, that you're not going to short it on the edges and your model not
Yeah.
come out right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then as far as like, for this one, I think you were talking about there were, other cameras or sensors that, they did in the past on this certain asset.
hmm
Um, did you hear of any advantages was the client able to, to go into? I think, when we talked about doing this webinar, you were saying they had to use two drones with two P1s and it took this certain amount of days at, this cost. Can you kind of help us understand the advantages our medium format camera, overcome than what they've done in the past to prior workflow?
Yeah. So they've tried this, not this particular spot, but they've tried it with a P1, which is 46 megapixels.
Yep.
And they had to run duels. I mean, basically the phase one cut it in less than half. It was twice as fast doing the project. They had to send teams. Typically, they would send a team of engineers out here, six guys. I believe it was like 160 man hours of them going through and manually documenting this spillway, and we were able to map it in 2 days. When it
Sounds like that
was,
would take weeks for them.
yeah, it was 2 weeks. Yep. So it cut it down significantly and cost. I mean, it
Yep.
definitely saved them quite a bit of money.
Paying those UAV operators over engineers, I'm sure you're going to save some costs there.
Yep, definitely.
Well, hey, going into that second job you had with our camera, it was an oil and gas, the pipeline. So walk us through, this project. And this was more, correct me if I'm wrong, Wyatt, but these are more still images. We're, really looking at detail here, but I'll let you tell the audience what this one have a task for you.
Yep. So this was a condition inspection. This pipeline's from back in, I believe, the 50s, that it was put up. So every so often they have to go through and they have to detailed inspect this thing. I mean, you wouldn't think it's going to go anywhere. It's huge pipes. They're in concrete, but it shifts and moves and all kinds of stuff. So they have to go up and check all these braces. They have to check the condition of the coating that's on it. So it wasn't a typical mapping job. We were looking for individual still images of the different joints and weld points. If there were cracks in the coating that were on it, anything out of the ordinary. So yeah, this was definitely different. Not to mention, large tanker ships that were running through this canal at the same time underneath of it, and
Yeah.
there's an electric fence down in the water that stops invasive carp from traveling. The way they typically inspected this was they brought in a helicopter and they would dangle their inspector pretty much from the helicopter to inspect the top side of that arch, and then he would harness in and hang from underneath and inspect the underside of it.
Okay.
Right there alone, a helicopter and hanging somebody from it, that's expensive. No
Yeah.
doubt.
Yeah.
So we were able to fly this and focus on the individual joints. The inspector right over my shoulder looking at the monitor,
Yeah.
showing me exactly what he wants.
I think one of the quotes was, didn't the he's able to see the welding that the welder.
Yeah.
I, I
Yes.
Tell us what he said by that, Wyatt.
Yeah, he was able to see the ripples in the weld. So when you're
Ripples, that's
welding,
right.
you're
Yep.
using a metal stick going around welding. You could see as they stopped and made each seam or had to change a welding stick, the images were that detailed. You could just see the ripples in it
Yep.
through layers of paint. I mean,
Yep. Yeah, I think, and walk us through like when you did this job, were you able to fly it all, from one side of the river, or did you have to go over to the other side to complete the second
I,
half of the mission?
yeah, I could have done it all from one side. I just felt more comfortable splitting it in two. So what we wound up doing was going up one side of it, dropping down, pitching the camera up, coming back down, getting the underside, flipping over, up and back, and then we swapped sides and went over to the other side of the river.
Yeah. Well, hey, as we're wrapping up here, Wyatt, one thing I want to ask, is a medium format camera. When you're taking images, like, can you tell the market today, like, just some advantages they would see, right away when using a phase one camera?
The first thing I noticed with one of these images was, and I'm used to DJI or Parrot or these other normal cameras that are out there where you tap the focus and you get back to your laptop and you pull the images up to take a look at it. You're zooming in and they've got that sweet spot that's right in the middle where you tap to focus and it focuses that area and then everything else starts to kind of pixelate. That doesn't happen with a phase one image. Once you've got the focus set and crisp, it blew me away that I could zoom in on something off to the far corner of the image and it was
Yeah.
still perfectly crisp and in focus.
Yep. That's a key advantage. And then I guess, to the pilots and operators out there today, I mean, you're very experienced. What would you say coming into a phase one camera? How much did it help to understand like camera settings? Like now we offer a photography 101 course where I've partnered with John Gilbert, who's our support manager. But how helpful was that when operating a phase one camera?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch it. That
No, you're good. I'm just, as far as camera settings, so like an ISO setting, an
Yep.
f-stop, a shutter speed, like how helpful is that when operating our camera?
There, it depends. What I'll typically do is I'll put it on autofocus or auto exposure sometimes
Yep,
and
auto
see what
exposure.
it comes up with for its own, and it's
Okay.
usually pretty darn spot on. And I'll take it out and put it in manual mode from there and start doing my images or mapping, and then just adjust the ISO as I need. But usually it's auto settings are pretty on point.
That's good to know. And then as far as processing our data, can you walk through like both of these jobs mapping? Let's do the mapping job first, Wyatt. When, walk us through our raw format, the IIQ or proprietary IIQ format, and then converting that to a TIFF to a JPEG. Walk us through for the mapping mission. What does that processing the data look like?
Gotcha. So typically, when I'm doing these jobs, I've got two laptops going. One, I bring my images back. I pull the IIQ card. First thing I do is I copy them over to an SSD drive. These SSDs are just amazing, terabyte or bigger. You've got plenty of storage room, and going through a USB-C, the images transfer super fast. So that's the first thing I do is I dump my images onto a card, start looking through a few. You don't have to look through every image with these. I mean, they don't change. The focus doesn't get off. You once you've verified a picture or two is okay, then I usually just dump them on the drive. I'll take them to the second computer and start converting them over because it does take a little time. If you wait till
Yep.
the end of the job, you've got some time built up where you've got to convert your images over. But then I'll go into Capture One on the second computer and start exporting my images to whatever format the customer needs, whether it's a JPEG or a TIFF. I start converting them over there. Just put them in my file structure. They're already all numbered, and then start adding my geotags as well.
And the geotags coming from your PPK unit, correct?
Yeah, so I'm running a field of view
That's
PPK.
GeoSnap, correct?
The GeoSnap Pro PPK.
Yep.
And what that's doing is that's got a hot shoe going to the phase one. So every time I take an image, it's triggering and pulling very precise, GPS data. gives me a completely separate file that I can go in and import those into the EXIF of my phase one images.
Yeah. Let's dive into like the inspection side. I know you're looking for detail there. So as far as I'm assuming you've probably used Capture One before, Wyatt. So if you want to, you know, do you open those up in Capture One? You make your photo, your edits in there, and then you convert those to a JPEG that the client wants to see. And then does it, when you convert it to a JPEG, is it holding its sharpness for the end user, the engineer wanting to see that imagery?
Yeah, so a lot of times I don't have to make that much in the way of edits to my images. As long as when I'm flying, I'm watching my settings and I'm adjusting the ISO a little bit here and there. It's very rare that I have to do any kind of edits to these. If anything, maybe darken them just a tad if I've overexposed something, and that's really been me doing it. But yeah, I use the Capture One. I go in, take a look, make sure the images are all properly exposed, and convert them over to JPEG and export them right out. The image size always stays the same. It's not losing any kind of data going from a IIQ to a JPEG. Yeah, they're perfect. And I'll double check them. I'll pull the original image up and I'll pull the converted JPEG up and check the size of them. It's always spot on. Yeah.
How about that file size? I know for some, and I talk to them quite often, where it's massive.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
they're
as let's talk us through like, what you do to eliminate that file size where, it sounds like on an inspection or relating to this dam, the spillway, it sounds like you're able to take fewer photos, which would mean fewer photos to process. But talk us through an average file size and how you combat that with the large file size that we have.
Yeah, they are big. I'll give it that. Most images that I take seem to be right around the zero point 0.7 gigabyte size. So you can start stacking up data pretty quick. I think that spillway that we did was 1.6 terabytes of images. Now that was overkill and it was 1 millimeter GSD, but like I said, the SSD drives, that is just the way to go. You're not going to really upload phase one images to Dropbox or Google Drive very easily. Most of the time when I'm doing larger projects, if the client's not right there, I'm putting them on the SSD drives and FedEx them out. But yeah, seems to be the easiest way
That's
for me.
That's perfect. And to those of you, I mean, within IX Capture, we have a setting that you can go in, a drop down. You can convert from an IIQL is the standard format that you would typically have on your camera, but you can bump that down to an IIQS. We have IIQL being lossy and then somewhat lossy, but you should go down to around 50 to 70 megabytes with that. I guess to close out, Wyatt, I mean, a question that I try to listen to customers often, and then convert that to the product team to develop or update the firmware on the next firmware to make those fixes, those bug issues. As far as a magic wand that you would have, what's like a request you have for us at phase one? And I could tell our product team to make this product even more elite as we go on forward and adapt as technology has, and we hope to do so here.
Um, yeah, I mean, the camera is pretty darn perfect the way it is. I think the only thing that would make my workflow easier would be if I had a way to automatically have them come out as a JPEG or a different file format instead of having to convert them to an IIQ. That or maybe directly importing the geotags from whatever PPK unit you might be using. They're natively tagged, obviously, from the drone, but if you want precise, you have to use something else. So if it could automatically import that, it would just save a step in my process. But
Yep.
other than that, yeah, I wouldn't change a thing.
Well, good deal. As we wrap up things, again, my name was Nick. I was your host today. I work here at Phase One, been here a couple of years now. And then Wyatt, I'll let you do a conclusion, a goodbye to those, and then we'll wrap up and let people get on about their day and get to flying.
Gotcha. Yeah. So obviously, if anybody has any questions or need some pointers, reach out to me, Nick. Yeah, happy to help.
Wyatt, thanks again for joining us. You're one of our better users out there today, not only a dual application side. So yeah, like Wyatt said, feel free to get a hold of myself or Wyatt. I could definitely get you Wyatt's contact information when you reach out. But again, thank you for those tuning in today, utilizing the right sensor for the right job. Thanks again, Wyatt. We'll talk to
Yeah,
you
thanks,
soon.
Tim.